in Rucho. In Rucho, said that the federal law doesn't apply, which is an odd thing, but but there you have it. At any rate, New York State, I don't know if it's possible to throw the graphic up briefly, but New York State's constitution, like all state constitutions, enumerates a really essential individual right to vote and a right to equal protection of the law. That really is the premise of the film. I began shooting it in June of 2017, and it's about a court case, but I'm not an attorney. Richard is, but I'm not. But we all can participate in the court of public opinion, and to my mind, that really is what this is about. Is to try to frame the narrative that this really is not about us versus them. It's not about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about whether we're going to have a representative government or not. And the film is about what happened in a congressional redistricting, and congressional races and districts tend to get the most attention. But the real nitty-gritty of this happens at the state level, and that is where really the rubber hits the road for school funding, for policing, for environmental issues, banking laws, really you name it, the gamut. So I hope that the league will use and promote this film and try to get people to connect the dots on what again is rightfully perceived as a complex issue, but at its heart, it's really a simple issue. It's a math trick. It's a math cheat. The film begins with a demonstration that I created using pennies and dimes, and that's available for anyone to use. And for that matter, I've decided after a lot of thought to make the film you're about to see available to any League of Women Voters chapter anywhere that wants to screen the film. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you will promote it. I put in 4 years of effort with my daughter. I believe in representative democracy. I see it as a duty because life's been pretty good to me. So anyhow, I hope you enjoy the film. Again, it's an attempt to take a complex issue and spell it out in a concise and hopefully understandable 30-minute presentation. I think it's critical to whether we're going to survive as a representative democracy or not. For all of the faults that people point out to the problems we're having with representation at the time, if democracy is not well, I submit that gerrymandering is the infection, and that's what really has to be dealt with. So that's about what I have here. You can let it rip. I'll be glad. I'll stay on. I'll be glad to answer any questions and add what I can afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Now we're going to look at the film. And just as a reminder, if you anticipate any issues in viewing this through the webinar, the link to the film on Vimeo is in the chat. And all you need to do is click on it. The film will open up in a new window, then join us after viewing it. But let's get started with the film.
Partisan redistricting, or gerrymandering, is about fractions, percentages. These coins represent voters in an evenly divided state, 50 dimes, 50 pennies. These 100 coins elect 10 representatives. That means each voting district must contain 10 coins. Now, real people don't live in neat rows, so let's mix them up. Okay, this is our hypothetical evenly divided state. Let's see what happens if the dimes draw the maps. 10 coins in each district. For the dimes, first thing we do is pack the pennies. Give them 2 safe districts, but pack them solid. The remaining 8 districts are won by the dimes, by smaller but still comfortable margins. The dimes win 8 districts, and the pennies win 2. The dimes overwhelmingly control the legislature. Of course, if the pennies drew the district lines, the opposite would be true. Let's rig it for the pennies. For the pennies, we follow the same pack and crack strategy. Pack the dimes into 2 safe districts and crack the remaining 8 districts to win by the same margin, 8-2. Well, now that we've destroyed democracy, let's consider what this map would look like if the districts were drawn for compactness and keeping communities of interest together. You get evenly divided districts in an evenly divided state. Some go heavily dime, some go penny, but that's to be expected. People live where they live, and that is what democracy is about. It's not about party bosses rigging election districts so they can fix the election results.
Yeah, my name's Monica von Dobenek. I live in South Londonderry Township in Lebanon County. I'm here because I think, one person, one vote is the basis of our whole system of government, and it has been horribly twisted through this gerrymandering where our representatives pick their voters rather than the other way around. I think anybody who looks at the maps can see how egregious it has become.
We, in the General Assembly, get the honor once every decade to cast a vote on congressional redistricting.
So this process has been a very public process, a very open process, and one in which our doors have been open to receive input throughout the year. And the end product that we were shooting for, and that is to have a map that would ultimately be constitutional, legal, and fair, and I believe that's what we've produced here today.
This is how the bill originally was introduced in the legislature in September of 2011. It just says the first district is composed of a portion of this Commonwealth. The second district is composed of a portion of this Commonwealth. They inserted the language at the last day. Here's what the actual final bill looks like. It's just page after page of lists of counties and wards and divisions.
The actual language of the districts was not dropped in until 9 in the morning, so the congressional redistricting plan was available for the legislators to see, for the press to see, for the people of Pennsylvania to see for only 14 hours before it came up for a final vote in the state Senate.
And I think this plan clearly meets constitutional and statutory obligations to reflect one person, one vote, and to send our congressional representatives to Washington, D.C.
If you ask the Republican leadership, have they complied with one person, one vote, they insist that they have. What would you say to that point of view?
I would say they're wrong. And I think anybody who looks at the map, that they devised could see that. There are places where the maps are like one house wide.
Most famous of that is the 7th Congressional District, the Goofy Kicking Donald Duck District. Just to highlight some of the absurdities in that, it has these big areas that are connected by these tiny, narrow isthmuses. And one of them is a place called Creed's Seafood and Steaks. So the 7th District basically includes just that building and its parking lot.
This map is absolutely one person, one vote. 705,687 in 5 districts and 705,688 in 13 districts.
We have 18 congressional districts, and the map is drawn in such a way that 13 out of the 18 are are held by Republican members of Congress, no matter what the election looks like statewide. So there are 5 districts that are held by Democrats, and as you'll see, the Democrats win these districts by big margins. 85%, 91%. So the 2nd congressional district, Congressman Evans's district, is regularly won by something like a 90-10 margin by Democrats because they've been designed to be so clustered into that district. Statewide vote share, Democrats got 50.8% of the votes statewide in congressional races in 2012, 50.8% of the votes, but they only got 5 out of 18 seats, which I think is about 28% of the seats in our congressional delegation.
We are suing under the Pennsylvania Constitution, saying that the current maps violate free expression and association claims. They violate the equal protection guarantees under the Pennsylvania Constitution and the free and equal clause under the Pennsylvania Constitution. We're arguing that in order to have a fair process, partisan records, party affiliation can't be part of the districting process.
So this is a lawsuit brought on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania and 18 individual voters, and it challenges Pennsylvania's congressional plan, our map for congressional districts, under the Pennsylvania Constitution. Pennsylvania has 18 congressional districts, and it's a very closely divided state on partisan lines. So you might expect that our congressional delegation would have, say, 9 Democrats and 9 Republicans, or maybe 10 and 8, but that's never how it works. The plan was engineered so that 13 Republicans would always win. So one example of this is Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, which is part of the western suburbs of Philadelphia. It has about 800,000 people, which is to say it has about the right number of people to have 1 member of Congress representing Montgomery County. Instead, the maps were drawn in such a way that Montgomery County is divided among 5 different congressional districts, and not one of those 5 representatives lives in Montgomery County. So it's the 3rd biggest county in Pennsylvania. It has its own distinct political needs and wishes, yet it is pretty much not represented at all in Congress the way this map has been drawn.
Do you solemnly swear that you will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth?
And the Constitution of this Commonwealth.
If so, say, I do. Congratulations.
When elected officials are sworn in, they swear to uphold the state constitution. Just look at what they are doing. Do they follow what the Constitution requires, which is that they are compact and contiguous? And our argument would be that they absolutely do not.
My name is Mimi McKenzie. I'm the legal director for the Public Interest Law Center. So today we urge the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to uphold and protect the freedoms in our state constitution and return elections to the people. I want to introduce our co-counsel from Arnold and Porter Case Schuler, David Gersh.
There came a moment in response to questioning from the justices when Speaker Turzai's lawyer came out and admitted that, in fact, this was a purely political exercise, that they knew how to identify the Democratic voters, that they did it, and the map was drawn based on that fact. And they made the claim, they took the position that there should be no limits whatsoever on how partisan the districts could be.
In the day's other news, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw out the state's congressional map. It ruled that districts had been so heavily gerrymandered to benefit Republicans that it violated the state's constitution. The court gave the Republican-led legislature until February 9th to fashion a replacement. But GOP leaders said that they would appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court.
The drawing of congressional lines, that's in the federal constitution. We think it was a completely partisan, ultimate gerrymander. This was and is a usurpation of democracy that is put in the hands of legislators.
Would you be okay with the court's decision if they had ruled the map unconstitutional but given you more time, say?
No.
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 Can you go into that a little bit?
Yes, because they don't have the power to do that. This is nothing short of alarming. This is really inappropriate.
I think it's really important for everyone to understand there is no constitutional right to an unconstitutional map. And so let's make no mistake, they're benefiting from the way the lines they're drawn right now, but there's no right to hold on to a map that's unconstitutional.
So before we move on, there's a couple of things I think should be mentioned. There are congressional district maps, there are House representative maps, and there are state Senate maps. So there's 3 sets of maps. The other issue is that in January 2018, the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court ruled the congressional district maps an illegal gerrymander and ruled that new maps had to be drawn immediately. But those maps are only congressional maps. They did not order new maps for state senators or state representatives. The third issue is the difference between a lawsuit and legislative reform.
Our bill is about the future. Our bill is about what's going to happen in 2021, 2031, 2041, and beyond. The court case was only dealing with the congressional districts. It did not alter the state house or state senate districts that we've had since 2011. And secondly, it changed the congressional map, but it did not change the process that we use to draw those maps. And our effort, with broad bipartisan support, is to change that so that an independent citizens commission is in charge of redistricting the next time around and for decades thereafter.
Let me officially welcome folks here at the Church of the Good Samaritan. We're thrilled to be hosting this event. With that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Dr. Carol Cunningham.
Let me say again, this is a nonpartisan discussion. Both parties do this. The Democrats did a really good job with their tools available in Pennsylvania in 1991. In 2001, the Republicans said, "Oh, really?" And they did an even better job. And if you go across Pennsylvania, especially our House districts, you'll see all of our small cities or denser towns split. They're cracked out. So here, this is Beaver Falls. It's been split into 4 different House districts. And look at the one that goes actually through Beaver Falls and then just keeps going. That was very, very carefully done to make sure that community has no voice. That's cracking. This is a picture of Allentown. That's another city that ties with Reading as being one of the most underfunded school districts in the country. So Allentown is divided into 3 House districts. It ought to have somebody who is thinking only about Allentown. Instead, it's a piece, and the least important piece, of 3 districts. In our area, in my area, here in Chester County area, we have lots of examples of communities that are just cracked right out, divided up. Phoenixville is one, Norristown is one, Westchester is another. I could go on a long time to tell you the ways that this impacts policy. I'll give you one more specific example and then a kind of general point about this. Lead poisoning. We've all heard about Flint, Michigan, and the lead poisoning in the water. I don't know if you know, but there are 18 cities in Pennsylvania that have far worse lead poisoning than Flint, Michigan, because these are cities with older housing and older buildings, and they're all painted with lead paint, and every time you open a window or a door, there's lead dispersed into the air. So we have 18 cities, far worse. You can see there's a kind of a little faint blue line there. Do you see it? That's Flint. That's how the lead poisoning in Flint. We are far, far worse than that. But for comparison, the lead exposure rate in Flint is 3.21%, which is toxic. In York, it's 12.41. Lebanon, it's 12.91. If you could see this well, you'd see that all of these cities have at least 4 times the level of lead exposure that Flint does. It's difficult to compare Pennsylvania as a state, though, because we don't have mandatory testing. Most states do. And you would think a state where this has turned out to be a serious problem would immediately, the legislature would say, we need to do mandatory testing of children at these ages so we can catch this early and make sure it's remediated. Pennsylvania has not done that.
I'm from Monroe County.
I'm from North Catasauqua.
And I'm from Coopersburg, Pennsylvania. I'm on the bus because I'm tired of my state representatives and my state senators being held accountable to their party leaders as opposed to the citizens of Pennsylvania.
Fair District's PA from Berks County, we're going to Representative Turzai, the Speaker of the House. We're going to his office. Any future redistricting bills need to go to another committee other than the House Government Committee, where they will be stopped or eviscerated.
This meeting of the House State Government Committee is called to order. We've had a lot of lobbying of my office, of my colleagues. House Bill 722 sets up an unaccountable commission of citizens not elected by their fellow citizens, but ultimately appointed. And I think the best way to make sure we have a citizens actually being the ones redrawing, citizens who are held accountable to their fellow citizens who elect them to office, is to totally gut and replace this bill with the amendment that is now before us. I think if you truly want this done by the citizens, then I think the best way is to make sure those citizens are elected, not appointed.
This process is broken. If you need any greater testament, look at what will happen by 11 a.m. today.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment passes 15 to 11.
Thank you, Representative Hill. The bill is amended. We'll go over for the day. Motion to adjourn by.
The people have the right to alter and reform. The people have the right to alter and reform. The people have the right to alter and reform. Our Pennsylvania Constitution says that, promises that, and yet that right has been denied us here in this House again and again and again. Gerrymandering undermines accountable government, and we are gathered here to make clear that that must change.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Eric Rowe, and I'm the proud Republican prime sponsor of House Bill 722. Just like freedom, democracy is a fragile thing, and it must be fought for and protected, and that is what we're going to do with an independent redistricting commission.
Good afternoon. I'm Tim Stevens, Chairman and CEO of BPEP, the Black Political Empowerment Project. The mission of BPEP is to encourage African Americans to vote in each and every election. However, we encourage all people to vote in each and every election.
You know what to do. Pass SB 22. You know what to do. Pass SB 22. You know what to do. Pass SB 22. You know what to do. Pass SB 22.
On June 25th, 2018, the Gerrymander Reform Bill, SB 22, finally came to the floor of the Pennsylvania House.
The Sergeant at Arms will open the doors of the House. We have some amendments in front of us. The amendment passes. The amendment passes.
There's quite a few amendments there. Could we take mine one at a time?
All those in favor of the amendment will vote aye. Those opposed, nay. Members will proceed to vote.
By the end of the day, more than 500 amendments were piled on top of the bill by both Democratic and Republican legislators.
So we are not adjourned at this time, but we will be back in session at 1 p.m.
The next day, the House reconvened but did not take up SB 22.
So members, if you could, please take your seats. Then we're going to go into some votes. At this time, the House is going to stand in recess until call of the chair. We are not going to be announcing a specific return date. There are no further votes. However, I would like to just make a couple of announcements, please.
When the House abruptly ended session on June 26th, the legislature once again blocked gerrymander reform for the State House, State Senate, and congressional delegation. But despite their inaction, the state Supreme Court decision took effect.
This is the new Pennsylvania map that was drawn after the Supreme Court ruled the prior map to be unconstitutional. It looks like Montgomery County is pretty much intact. You know, there may be some parts of Montgomery County that fall into a different district. It looks like up here it does. Berks County, where I live, is this right here. I am still within the 6th congressional district, but there's a major change to this map that I'm happy for. I'm actually in the same congressional district as the city of Reading. If you look at the old map, you can see the district that I live in stretches from Chester County up through Montgomery County, all the way across the midsection of Berks County, conveniently cutting out the city of Reading, which has about 88,000 citizens. That's an absurd gerrymander. So and you said that was Turzai who said that?
We think it was a completely partisan, ultimate gerrymander.
For that statement to be made with a straight face is absolutely ludicrous, that the new map is the ultimate partisan gerrymandering when you look at this monstrosity that was put through the legislature in 2011.
So the old map, you know, stretched 120 miles from the PA-Ohio border into the Laurel Highlands of Pennsylvania. It covered 6 counties, okay, 5 of which were split in some way. The new map is one geographically condensed area, which is southwestern Pennsylvania. It comprises of 4 counties, and it only splits 1 out of those 4 counties.
It's terrific. It's a wonderful map. It meets all this criteria. It's not just their job to have the certain number of people. It's to have fair and equal treatment, a fair vote, and to have compact and contiguous district. It's right in the Constitution.
Pennsylvania's redrawn 2018 congressional district map, the result of the League of Women Voters PA lawsuit, followed guidelines ordered by the court. Do not divide any county, city, incorporated town, borough, township, or ward except where necessary to ensure equality of population. Let the simplicity and clarity of those words sink in for a moment, because the Republican majority refused to comply with the court's order.
This was and is a usurpation of democracy that is put in the hands of legislators.
This is a usurpation of the sovereign power of the legislature under the Pennsylvania Constitution.
The congressional redistricting that is the prerogative of the state legislature to determine, not the state courts.
Would you be okay with the court's decision if they had ruled the map unconstitutional but given you more time, say?
No.
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 Can you go into that a little bit?
Yes, because they don't have the power to do that. This is nothing short of alarming. This is really inappropriate.
Ultimately, a special master was assigned by the court to redraw the congressional district map. For comparison, the old map split 28 Pennsylvania counties and 68 municipalities. The new map splits 13 counties and only 19 municipalities. The upshot? In the 2018 congressional election, Pennsylvania's delegation went from a gerrymandered 13-5 Republican-Democrat split to a 9-9 split, which mirrors the state's electorate. Make no mistake, this is a landmark case. It's the first time ever a Supreme Court, state or federal, has struck down a redistricting map on the grounds that general constitutional principles prohibit partisan gerrymandering. But as good as this ruling and the new map is, it's a limited victory. Pennsylvania's Senate and House legislative districts are as gerrymandered as ever. 2018 saw a record-breaking voter turnout, but 1/3 of voters did not have a choice for their state legislators. More than 1/3 of Pennsylvania House and Senate incumbents ran unopposed in the general election. Gerrymandering effectively insulates the people from their politicians and politicians from the public. And if nothing changes, legislative leaders will begin redrawing congressional, Senate, and House district maps again in 2021. Change is not easy, and there are few simple answers, but representative democracy really is at stake, and you either believe in it or you don't.
Do you solemnly swear that you will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of this Commonwealth? If so, say, I do.
A lot of times when I've talked to people about changing the Constitution, I've said the Constitution is not the problem. It's people raising their hand like we do, swear to uphold and defend it, and then they don't. They're the problem. It's people raising their hand like we do, swear to uphold and defend it, and then they don't. They're the problem.
We want people's votes to actually mean something. We want people to feel that they actually have an opportunity to help determine who represents them, not that the incumbents, regardless of party, determine who their voters are. Am I right about it? We want to see the end of divisive and continuing partisan bickering, which is tearing our Commonwealth apart and tearing our nation apart. This is what democracy looks like. This is right. Democracy looks like. This is what 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 democracy looks like.
Wow, that was a really powerful, inspirational film about how activists were at least able to make some changes in their districts and how things are determined. Robert, I want to go back to you. You mentioned earlier when we were talking about the New York State Constitution, and we didn't get that, that slide up for you. So I'd like to get the slide up and have you speak very quickly about that, if you don't mind.
Am I up?
I hear you and see you, but I don't see the slide yet.
Okay. Well, we'll just have to wing it. This goes back to sort of the whole point of why I made the film to begin with, because if you look at the New York State Constitution, it says every citizen shall be entitled to vote. No person shall be denied the equal protection of the laws of this state. To my mind, the sorting and selecting of voters by legislators is not equal protection of qualified voters. And while the language varies from state to state, the individual right to vote is written down in all 50 state constitutions. So when people say, and people regularly say, there is a right to vote, it's sacrosanct. The fact is, the individual right to vote only exists in state constitutions. And state constitutions are what every state legislator in the country is required to uphold and defend. This is about the right to vote, not the suggestion to vote, not the permission to vote. It's about a right to vote. And what I made this film because I'm really trying to change the perspective. This has really crept up on us. You can drop the slide at any time. What is so remarkably different about gerrymandering today than the gerrymandering of 20 or 30 years ago is data mining. There are hundreds of points of data on everyone. There's a longer version of this film that goes into the one time that this data was forcibly turned over in state court. No, actually, it was turned over in federal court and then turned over to a state court that demonstrated the data that state legislators use. And that's the game. That's the trick, is we do it in private, and then it's a fait accompli. Here it is, you know, tough noogies. This is just the way it is. The genius of representative democracy is the idea of a free market of ideas that are judged by qualified voters. Gerrymandering is a monopoly. It is antithetical to the most basic idea of what representative democracy is supposed to be. So what happened in Pennsylvania is a win. And I think it's important to celebrate wins. The delegation, the congressional delegation in Pennsylvania shifted by 4 seats. Does anyone know how slim the majority is in the House right now? I believe, depending on how you count it, it's 3 or 4 seats. So one state ungerrymandering a congressional delegation had a huge impact. And so, you know, I think we need to recognize and celebrate our wins. I think we need to join in this battle of narratives for representative democracy and say, I've had enough of this us versus them. This is about whether the words people, you know, pledge allegiance to or mouth have any meaning. So you know, again, I hope people enjoyed the film. I hope they will share it. It is available for the league to use. And also that little pennies and dimes introduction, that also is a separate standalone clip that any league can use. And I want to touch on one last thing before I shut my yap and let you talk about specifics of New York. A lot of otherwise smart people actually don't understand the math trick. And my incidental story is that somebody that I've known since grade school, who had a master's degree in chemistry. So, you know, he had to have had quite a lot of math in his training. He didn't understand the trick until he saw the pennies and dimes. It's a simple but abstract math cheat, and share it. If you know a famous person that would like to redo it, I'd love to have a famous person redo it. I'm doing the best I can with the resources I have, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
And I think we can all agree that is a terrific film, and even somebody wrote in the chat, the pennies and dimes is very easy to understand. Now, what we're going to do is, Robert just mentioned, is we're going to start unpacking the issues with our experts and look specifically at New York State now. To do that, we have Richard Rifkin, an Albany League member who is also the legal director of the Albany Law School Government Law Center and has 40 years of experience in state government. Jennifer Wilson is the Deputy Director for the League of Women Voters of New York State. She serves as the in-house lobbyist and policy advisor. Now, I see that somebody has already found the Q&A feature. And if you have a question as we're going along for Richard, Jennifer, or Robert, write it in the Q&A and we'll take those towards the end of the program. Now, Richard, I'm going to call on you. While it's easy to say that this took place in Pennsylvania and wonder at the relevancy, could you tell us the situation we have in New York State right now for redistricting? You need to unmute.
As Robert said, this is complicated, and it is. So I will try to make this as understandable as possible. First of all, let me just say that gerrymandering has been with us almost since the start of our nation back in the early 19th century. Gerrymandering itself, the word comes from the governor of Massachusetts in 1814, whose name was Eldridge Gerry. He approved a map that was favorable to his own party. And one of the newspapers described one of the districts as looking like a salamander. So you had a Gerry and a salamander, and a new word was developed, and it has stayed with us through our history. In other words, this is a long, long, long problem. And we are trying to make efforts today to deal with this problem. New York has taken a step. It has created a commission, the type of commission that was discussed in the film but failed in Pennsylvania. In 2014, the voters approved a constitutional amendment creating an independent redistricting commission. And the commission is now working on the current redistricting following the 2020 census. It is the first time this commission has operated, so we have no sense of how this is going to work out. And I can tell you, while other states form commissions as well, there is no other commission like this anywhere in the country. So we can't look at another state and say, this is a model for us, and we can get an idea of how it's going to work. So it's all very uncertain, but at least let me give you the outlines of what is supposed to happen. The commission itself is a 10-member commission. 2 members are appointed by the Speaker and the Minority Leader of the Assembly, and 2 members, and I say it's 2 members each, and 2 members are appointed by each, the Majority Leader of the Senate and the Minority Leader of the Senate. So you have 8 members supported by the leaders of 2 different parties. The members who are appointed then appoint 2 additional members. So you have a 10-member commission, basically with 5 members Republican leaning and 5 members Democratic leaning. By the way, and this is all written into the Constitution. The Constitution provides that the members may not have held public office for 3 years. They may not have been lobbyists for 3 years. Their spouses can't be public officials or lobbyists. So there's an attempt to find people who have knowledge, but at least have some independence from the current situation. Now, how does this commission work? It is supposed to draft maps for the Congress, for the Senate, and the Assembly. And it has actually started that process now because maps are due by September 15th. Unfortunately, instead of issuing a set of maps for each of the houses, the commission has issued 2 sets of maps. One of them was advanced by the Republican-leaning members of the commission, and the other by the Democratic-leaning members of the commission. So this is not a good start, because this is supposed to be an independent commission that draws districts in the interests of the voters, and they have, in essence, issued what are seen as political maps. Once these maps are issued, the commission is required to hold public hearings. And that is where we are now. The hearings, by virtue of the Constitution, this is all in the Constitution, have to be held in specific places. Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, White Plains, and a number of locations in the city of New York and out on Long Island. The hearing for the Capital District is coming up on November 1st, this coming Monday. And we will be testifying at that hearing. When those hearings are concluded, the commission is then supposed to go back and draw what it would be its final maps, in essence, the maps that it will draw after hearing all the public comments. Under the Constitution, I'm now reciting from the New York State Constitution, the map shall not, racial and minority language groups should not have less opportunity to participate in the political process than other members of the electorate. There shall be equal number of inhabitants in each group, or approximately, have to be contiguous, has to be compact as possible in form, and the districts may not be drawn to favor or disfavor incumbents, other particular candidates, or political parties. So that's where we are in terms of what the commission is doing at this time. It's holding hearings, then it will go back and draw new maps, but hopefully based upon the comments that were received. The commission by January 15th has to submit a map or maps to the legislature. It takes 7 votes of the 10-member commission to approve a map. And hopefully, there will be 1 map approved. The legislature then passes on that map. There is a vote in both houses where they decide whether to approve or disapprove the map. They may not amend the map. They have to vote on the map that's been submitted to them. If they approve it, it then goes to the governor. The governor can sign or veto. If it's approved by the legislature and signed by the governor, the commission's map becomes the map for the next 10 years. If the map is not approved, it goes back to the commission and they redraw a map. By the end of February, they have to send a new map, second map, back to the legislature. We go through the same process. And by the way, to approve, the legislature requires a 2/3 vote, both in the first instance and in this instance. If it's approved, again, and they can amend, and if it's approved, they become the maps. If the legislature does not approve, at that point, the legislature is free to draw whatever maps it will. And to some degree, we're back to where we started. Couple of comments. One, I think it's exceedingly unfortunate that the commission has drawn 2 sets of maps. Number one, it makes the commission look political. It's discouraging to the public. And I think it makes the hearings less meaningful. The public is not given 1 map on which to help the commission improve during these hearings. it's given two competitive maps from the party representatives. But that's where we are. That's where we are. Let me make one final point, and that is there will be on the ballot this year. For those of you who have voted, you have seen it. For those of you who are yet to vote, you will see it when you go to the polls. There's Proposition 1. It is exceedingly complex, and I won't even begin to start to describe it. But if it is adopted by the voters, it changes the rules beginning January 1st, 2022. So what the rules are going to be post January 1 is going to be determined by whether or not the voters approve Proposition 1. And that is pretty much where we are in New York State at the moment.
Thank you, Richard. Now I'm going to turn to Jennifer. Jennifer, you have been so involved with the issue of redistricting for absolutely months. Those of us who have been working with you know how much you've put into this. And as we hear the challenges that Richard's bringing up, tell us, why should we participate in the process?
Sure, and sorry if my video quality is a little bit bad. I had to switch to my iPad. I was losing connection on my laptop, but Richard said something really interesting, which is this idea that there's two maps makes it not meaningful or less meaningful having these hearings because we're asking New Yorkers to talk about two sets of maps instead of one. And while we totally agree that having two sets of maps is not ideal, we do still believe that these hearings can be incredibly impactful and incredibly meaningful just by simply showing how many people are turning out to testify at these hearings, or if they can't testify at the hearings, to provide comments to the commission to basically let their voices be heard on the topic of redistricting. Part of the 2014 amendment included mandating a minimum number of hearings throughout New York State, so that way a commission couldn't just get together and do whatever they wanted. These hearings are basically a constitutional right for all of us here in New York State. So it's very, very important that if you have something to say about your maps, which I'm sure that you do, if you haven't looked at them yet, definitely you need to look at them and check and make sure that things are looking the way you want them to be looking. But you want to make sure that you either sign up to testify at these hearings or that you submit comments so that you won't be left out of this process. This is a once in 10-year process, meaning these district lines that are going to be drawn, we're stuck with them for 10 years. And if your lines aren't drawn in a way that represents your community, that's 10 years of unfair representation for you and your family and your neighbors.
So we do need to be involved. It's critical. The state hearings have already started across the state. What do you think we should be doing in terms of being part of that process? You've talked a little bit about that. Richard's talked a little bit about it, but can you tell us more?
Sure, and there's lots of ways to get involved with this process. It doesn't just have to be showing up at the hearing and, giving your comments, sort of doing like what you would see on like a C-SPAN or something. You don't have to do that necessarily. You could do something like submitting written comments where you would just send the commission an email or their form, comments about your community, about the areas in your community that you think are important to keep together. You could do the traditional testimony where you can sign up, you can go, or you can also testify virtually and provide comments again about your communities or specifically about the maps. The maps are on the New York Independent Redistricting Commission's website, nyirc.gov. They have a page with all of the maps in a Google map format, so they're very easy to look at and kind of see where you are on the map. You can even search your address on the map to see exactly where you are in relation to the proposals. Or if both of those things don't sound like something you want to do, you can create your own maps. There's a ton of free mapping software out there, representable.org, districtr.org, davesredistricting.org, where you can create your own proposed maps that you can submit to the commission for consideration. And all of this information is on the league's website, nyredistricting.org. So if something I said, it sounds interesting to you, we have testimony trainings on there where we talk about how to write testimonies, sample fill-in testimonies. So if you want to like have the really, really basic info on doing that, as well as a kind of quick and dirty mapping analysis of what you're looking for when you're looking at these maps, all of that is on our website, nyredistricting.org.
Thank you. Now, Richard, I'm going to come back to you. What recourse, if any, is there if unfair maps are proposed and voted in by our legislators?
Before I answer that, let me make very clear. I totally agree with Jennifer. I am disappointed that the commission came out with 2 maps, but I don't think that in any way should discourage you from testifying. It's very, very important that you do. And so I second everything that Jennifer said. With regard to the problem, if in the end, the maps are either procedurally developed in an improper way or are substantively improper, there can be a court challenge to the maps, and you just saw what happened in Pennsylvania. The same thing could happen here. Now, unfortunately, the federal courts in 2019, the US Supreme Court held that the federal courts will not hear a case based on gerrymandering. And so the federal courts have no jurisdiction to hear a case where the claim is simply gerrymandering. They still can hear a claim based upon a violation of the Voting Rights Act or the one person, one vote rule. But unless your claim is based upon those 2, you can't go to federal court. And I will tell you, historically, a lot of these cases have been brought in. You can go to state court if there has been a violation of the state constitution. And when I say it can be a substantive violation, and those are the more serious ones where you look at the map and explain why it doesn't comply with the standards set forth in the Constitution, then the judges will take a serious look at the map and see what they think of it. However, you can bring procedural challenges as well. For instance, and I'm not sure how far this would get you, but let's say the commission did not hold a hearing in Albany. It says in the Constitution that they have to hold a hearing in Albany. If they don't do that, it lays the groundwork for a state court lawsuit. So in the end, if you're not happy with the maps, look at the procedure that was followed, look at the substance of the maps, and see whether you've got a potential cause of action in state court.
Thank you. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look at questions from our participants. And Robert, this one is actually for you from Judy Weinstein. How were the citizen members of the Redistricting Commission selected in the Pennsylvania redistricting bill?
Well, just the bill did not become law, but it was essentially by random. It was like choosing a jury. You had to have certain minimal qualifications, and you were entered into a pool, and members were selected randomly. So that was their mention of that. There's one thing I'd like to add, just might help people who are confused or by this issue that I found useful. And that is, in a way, you can bifurcate the issue into the who and the how. That's what Richard was talking about. It's just sort of a simple way to think of it, which is who is going to draw the maps and what are the rules, so that it's a good way to understand it. And what I was really struck by in the Pennsylvania case was the simplicity of the court order, which was based on the Pennsylvania Constitution. But basically they said cities, counties, towns, and boroughs, they have defined borders. You know where they start and they stop. Split the fewest of them. It's a nonpartisan and remarkably simple metric that it doesn't have to be the only metric, but I think splitting the fewest cities, counties, towns, boroughs, wards is a really good place to start.
Okay, thank you. People, if you have questions, ask them. Now, I do have something from an anonymous attendee. What does Proposition 1 say? Well, we are going to look at that. It's on the ballot now, and I'm going to bring up a slide. Oops, wait a minute. Oh, shoot. Just a sec. Got to share that. Okay, I think you can see that now. I know that these are not live links, but we will be sending these out to you when we send a survey at the end of the program. New York Proposal 1, the New York Redistricting Changes Amendment, is on the ballot now. It is complicated though, and we're recommending these sites as just some of the places that you can look, because we found those to have understandable explanations, plus they have identified what their positions are. As I said, we will be sending these to you. The issue at this point is that there are varying ways that people are looking at the proposal and how they might want to support it. And it's a little complex for us to handle at this point. Now, our next question is from Anthony LaFletch. I'm not sure if I'm saying your name properly. Does the panel feel the current Democratic supermajorities in the New York State legislature will likely bypass the IRC and create their own maps, since they have enough votes, if they agree among themselves, to create maps extremely favorable to them? Well, that's a packed question. Who would like to take that? Or who would like to start with that?
Let me give it a try to sort of explain what the best of circumstances I hope will happen. You know, that's a political question because you don't know what the politics are going to be like. Other than what you said is true, the Democrats have overwhelming majorities in both houses. But if all goes perfectly, at least in my view, the Redistricting Commission will propose a map, one set of maps, not two sets, one set of maps that people who are interested in redistricting, good government groups, editorial boards, papers, will respond to in a very positive way. And they would say, this is a map that is not gerrymandered, that takes into account the interests of the voters, and we urge the legislature to approve this map. That will bring political pressure on the legislature to approve a map which has wide support, and wide support among people who are interested in politics and in the election process. And in a perfect world, that type of pressure will cause the legislature to approve such a map. That's the hope. How it's going to come out, of course, no one knows, but I haven't conceded yet that just because one party controls both houses, that any possibility of fair maps is over, done with.
Anybody else want to speak to that?
Well, I think the only thing I would add is I don't think there's necessarily one uniform Democrat party for our state Senate and Assembly right now. I think we have a lot of young guns who lean a certain way on the scale of sort of Democratic, like socialist, all the way to the sort of like more moderate Democrat. And then I think we have our more middle of the line Democrats who have held their seats a long time. And I think there could be I don't think the supermajority will save the Democrats necessarily from having like their perfect map pass. I think there could be some segmentation between the party itself, even if they had control of the process. But I like Richard's prediction better. I like what he thought better.
Thank you. Now, we do have a question, which I think is beyond the scope of what we're doing today. We have had other programs on this. Someone said, can someone show the current map of New York State districts that have been gerrymandered? Then please explain where there are the most extreme examples of gerrymandered districts. That really is beyond where we're at, but we have had other programs. Jennifer, is there a particular place on the league's website that this individual could go to?
I believe New York Law School has some resources, and we have the link to their redistricting institute on our website. But I can think of one off the top of my head, which is Senator Biaggi's district. I think it's Senate District 34 is particularly offensive in terms of gerrymandering. But if you think of it this way, the Republicans drew the maps for the Senate. So they lean a little more Republican. They tend to favor upstate Republicans, whereas the Democrats drew the maps for the Assembly. They tend to lean a little bit more Democrat. They tend to favor Democrats and sort of box out upstate Republicans. So our mapping training is really helpful in this and kind of telling you what to look for when it comes to looking specifically at maps. But there's very obvious things that the movie also pointed out, as far as like, you know, talking about Donald Duck kicking Goofy. If your district is looking really, really crazy, you probably live in a very gerrymandered district.
Thank you.
The oddest district I can think of in New York is the 101st Assembly District. If you Google it, it's about 150,000 people. It jumps across 6 New York counties.
Thank you for that insight. Now, Robert, you have asked the panelists, if the 7-member commission cannot agree, does it simply go to the legislature? And let's answer that.
No. If 7 members don't approve a map, then they send over the map that has received the most number of votes. If more than one map receives the most number of votes, that is, 2 maps or more receive the same number of votes, then they have to send over all of those maps. And then if no maps are approved, they literally have to send over all the draft maps that they've been working with.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Now, I don't see any further questions and questions in the Q&A, so I think we're at the end. As we close, I want to thank Robert Millman for sharing his very compelling film and his insights into the process. And I do want to remind the audience that he's very generously allowed us to use this and to get it out to other people. You do have that link to the 30-minute program in the information that you've received. And we encourage you to share that. I'd also like to thank our experts, Jennifer Wilson and Richard Rifkin, and to all of you for participating in the program. In addition, we want to hear from you, and we're going to be sending you a survey. In that survey, in that email, you'll also get the links to Proposition 1 so that you can look at the 4 different sites that we've picked that have varying views as to what to do with that, but they're very understandable and they present their positions well. So please complete the survey. It's going to be really helpful for us in planning for future presentations. Thank you and good night.
Good night.